Okay, presence as transportation, which is number 3, and there was 3 dimensions to presence as transportation, which I thought were particularly interesting to think about in terms of Second Life. You are there is the first dimension of transportation, and I understood this to be the ability of the technology to transport you from your real world environment into the one constructed by the technology. So it's taking you away from where you are. And this seemed to be the kind of thing that something like Second Life tries to do. As I was just describing, perhaps in the realism section, I think there's a lot of overlap here with You Are There. Second Life provides this 3D world, the visual elements, the sound elements, which are intended so that we experience this other world, and we perhaps ignore and forget the world that we're in, the monitor screen, the sound of the TV or the other ambient sounds in the room in which you're using the computer. You forget those and you're transported into the 3D world. So that seemed to be what Second Life seeks to do, and the avatars kind of seem to be a dimension of that as well. We are taken somewhere else, but in a kind of third person, which is actually quite interesting. But I'm not sure why at the moment. The second dimension of transportation is it is here. So perhaps that we could say that's the opposite of You Are There, in that the technology might seek to take its virtual elements and plant them into your world. I don't think that's necessarily we can see that overtly in something like Second Life. And an example might be, earlier I was using a application on my iPhone, which was an example of augmented reality. Perhaps we could consider that to be it is here, and the application using the camera of the phone placed icons showing me various Wikipedia pages or other notable places in the environment around me. So perhaps we could say that is it is here. It's placing that Wikipedia information onto the real world that I'm looking at through the camera. But perhaps we can't really see much of that in Second Life. Well, I certainly can't at the moment. We are together is the third dimension of transportation, and that was certainly something very interesting there with Second Life, because Second Life is somewhere that it's not somewhere that an individual goes to lose himself in the virtual world. It's somewhere where a user goes predominantly to communicate with others. It's a very social, well, from what I know of Second Life, it's a very social space. And certainly my thinkings on this, particularly with the voice chat, this seemed to be very noticeable in the tutorial session on Thursday. Rather than me feeling I was in the Second Life space, I perhaps felt more as if I was in a shared auditory space with the other participants. My feeling here is this is probably because of the lack of visual stimulus in our tutorial. The motionless avatars, the lack of movement while we spoke. It felt as if the Second Life 3D environment, the flames of the fire, the logs that we were sitting on, the strangely dressed avatars themselves was superfluous. And in actual fact, I spent a good proportion of the time not looking at the small window on my laptop screen, and simply concentrating on the sound. So certainly, voice in Second Life seems to create a sense of we are together, and more than you are there, because I certainly didn't feel I was in the Second Life environment, but I did feel as if I was in a space where I could hear and speak to others. Those two things, and this may come in elsewhere, but they certainly felt very separate. The avatars around the fire were one dimensional environment, and the speaking of the real people in whatever rooms they were sitting in front of whatever kind of laptops, in whatever country in the world they were in. This was another dimensional, another kind of dimension, and they felt very separate. Okay, presence as immersion is number 4, and that seemed to be my initial thoughts about that were very sensory. So how immersed one is visually, and to do with the sound, and to do with touch as well. Certainly the voice tutorial in Second Life on Thursday was very immersed in the audio sense. I had some closed ear headphones on, so immersion for me seems to be about as much as being immersed in a world as being cut off from reality. So the closed ear headphones certainly cut off the real world audio distractions for me more than the screen and the Second Life window on the MacBook screen cut out the rest of the visual reality around me. So I certainly felt very immersed in an audio sense, but not in a visual sense. And that perhaps could be I use Second Life in a window rather than full screen, probably because it performs better that way. And in that way I could see the desktop and the other applications as well as the avatars sitting around the fire. So certainly there was something against being immersed in the campfire kind of environment of Second Life. There's another dimension that I was thinking about as well, in the voice addition to Second Life, and it's perhaps emotional. So using voice was certainly exciting. I was nervous about many things, about how my voice might sound to others, how that they might think of me because of the sound of my voice, and also the worth in what I would be able to say in an improvised way. So that brought about excitement, and perhaps through excitement, engagement in what was happening, and that could certainly be likened to a kind of immersion.